Welcome to Vanished Vail, the monthly series where we take you to Vail's special places. Now, people have made Vail their home for a lot of reasons over the years, but one family embodies two of the main reasons people moved to Vail in the 20th century. The Day family moved to Vail from Philadelphia in the 1930s, hoping that the warm weather and dry climate would improve their health. And they were also chasing that Wild West dream. For Voices of Vail, we interviewed Sally Bunting Day Hanson, whose parents brought her to Vail when she was only 3 years old. Some of that interview made it into Voices of Vail, but we had to leave a lot of it on the cutting room floor. This month, we'd like to share with you the extended cut of that interview, which will be accompanied by her family's amazing home movies.
My name is Sally Bunting Day Hanson, and I came out to Vail with my parents in, I guess it was 1933. My parents came out to Vail because both of them had health problems in Philadelphia. That's where I was born. And they were told to go to a dry climate, so they started west, and they're Model A. They met Jim Converse, who used to own the Tanque Verde guest ranch. They became fast friends, and I guess they stayed there for quite a while, and then he talked them into buying the La Posta Quemada Ranch for $1 an acre, 30,000 acres, which included some patented land and some forest lease and state lease and BLM lease. It did not have a house, it had just a funny little house on it, which became a part of the house that they built. They built a house, they made the adobes right on the spot. They dug a basement, and that's why it had a basement, because they made the adobes from the basement. It was a great house. It had the bedroom area. You went up 2 steps to the living room area and up 2 steps to the dining room area because it was built on a hill. And we did not have electricity. We had a kohler plant. A kohler plant is a generator which generates electricity. And it doesn't run all the time. It runs when you flip a switch and then it goes on and it makes kind of a noise. It runs by gas. The water came from a spring that my dad had rigged up somehow so that it pumped from the spring to a pump up on the hill. We always worried that the spring was going to go dry, we wouldn't have any water, but it never did. The original part of the house, I don't really know. It was I think a bunkhouse, or anyway, it was where George McClure, our foreman, who came with the ranch, thank goodness, because my father did not know anything about ranching. He was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. He was an electrical engineer. And so thank goodness for George, who was a real character. And he lived in the old part of the house, which became a part of the new house. He stayed with us for years until he finally died. And he was a real Western character. He had a bullet hole in his nose from a gunfight that he'd been in years ago. And I don't really know the story at all, except that I was a little girl and I would look at that and I was just amazed because he had a hole right through his nose. Well, right through his nose, right through his nose. It was just a hole all the way through his nose, which of course had healed, but it was, it's like weird looking. But he was a character. He had a wife who didn't like the ranch at all, so she lived in Tucson. And she would come out, I think, on weekends to see him. We had we had a cowboy on the ranch who had a family. And they had a little girl named Dolores, who was one of my playmates, because being an only child, there wasn't anybody to play with. But I was always busy with, I don't know, lots of animals, dogs and cats, and chickens, and getting the eggs. And that was a cute story that my mother taught me how to get the eggs from the hen by putting a bucket over the hen's head so the hen wouldn't peck my hand as I'm reaching under her to get the eggs. That was a big help because they're fierce. I do remember one of our cowboys, old Chico Lopez. He had a terrible stomach because he had ulcers, and he'd go up high on the mountain and get some kind of herb, I don't know what it was called, grind it all up and mix it in, and mix it up and drink that to cure his bad stomach. During roundups, there were a lot of cowboys that stayed in the bunkhouse just for about 6 or 7 days while we rounded up. And the cowboys came from all the neighboring ranches. Everyone sent a cowboy. That was the neighboring thing to do. The Mexican wife of the person that lived on the ranch, she cooked most of the meals for the cowboys, although my mother took lunch out to the cowboys in our pickup, old Jeep pickup truck. And her first lunch, having come out from Philadelphia, what did she know? She took peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Well, that was not a big hit. The cowboys just, what is this? So from then on, it was hot chili and beans and tortillas and salsa. That was what they wanted for lunch. Whether the weather was hot or cold, that's what they had, and that's what they got. And we hauled it in the back of a pickup truck in the big, huge kettles all sloshing around. Raised, there were beef cattle, mostly Herefords, until at some point my parents decided they were going to introduce Santa Gertrudis into the herd, and so they went to Texas to the King Ranch and bought some Santa Gertrudis bulls. In the meantime, they became great friends with all the people at the King Ranch, the Klebergs. They loved that. It was very, very elegant and social, and they thought that was great fun. But the Santa Gertrudis really, really improved our herd immensely. The calves, they would move. The bulls would, go around the ranch much more than the old Herefords. They just sat under a tree and didn't do anything. But the Santa Gertrudis really got the job done. And so that was a big event. Vail, to me, was the post office, the little church, the shipping pens, the school, a little funny school, little tiny school. And now I'm sure there were houses around, but I don't ever remember thinking much about houses. I just remember the post office and Mary Jane. I used to ride over and talk to her. I rode my horse to get the mail. There were some people that I rode with. One of them was Red Matthews, whose family had the gas station on the road where it turned off to Vail. It wasn't a freeway in those days. It was just the highway. And the other one was Jimmy Leon. And I think he had a brother, Oscar. I don't know. I can't remember their names, Oscar and Jimmy. Yeah, they were little rats too. We were bad. The night my parents had this huge party when they christened their house. This was amazing. All the neighboring ranchers came and they branded the beams of the house with their brands. And the living room had a lot of wooden beams going across. And I thought they were going to burn. I was banished to my room because, in those days children were to be seen and not heard. Go away. So I was shoved in my bedroom, but I thought the house was going to burn down. It was a wild and woolly party. Like the Wild West. They partied a lot in those days. And the Griffins, my parents spent a lot of time in Nogales at the Griffins Ranch. And they had a daughter, Ellen B., who was my age, and we used to hate each other. They used to have to, we'd be together in, say, a hotel room with the Pioneer or something. They have to hang a sheet between our beds because we'd fight. We were bad. But then we became, as we grew up, we became great friends.
Yeah.
But at that, when you want your children to be friends, you will be friends with this kid. It doesn't work. Yeah, my parents named the ranch La Posta Quemada because, La Posta Quemada means the burned post. And somewhere on the ranch there was a burned Indian trading post which had been burned down by the Apaches. And the old Butterfield Trail went right through the ranch, which is probably the road that I used to ride on that went to the Bill Place and the Red Hill and on to the Harrington Place and on and on. And so that was interesting. I always wondered where that burned post was. There must be a relic of it somewhere. But I never found it. I looked. It never rained out there. There was never enough rain, and the cows didn't get enough food. And my father was always complaining that it never rained on his rock pile. Oh, he was always concerned about water. And then there was the years that they seeded the clouds. The airplane where they would put, what was it, dry ice or something in the thunderheads, that it was supposed to make it rain. Well, I can still hear my father saying, "That's my cloud, and it's raining over on his land." That's not fair. So that was not a success. I don't think that, but they thought it might make it rain, but it didn't. And the Pantano, that was another adventure. We would go to Tucson probably once a week to buy groceries and just go to the movies and spend all day in town and then come home. And if it had rained, and the Pantano was running, there was no bridge in those days, and we sometimes spent 2 or 3 hours waiting for the water to go down before we could cross in the car. My father, meantime, would roll up his pants and wade out in the middle of the river, and if it came above his knee, we couldn't cross. So we had to wait for it to get below his knees, and it was dangerous. It was a big, roaring river.
Now, did you ever go through Colossal Cave?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, a lot of times. Free.
Did you and Francis go through it?
I think so, yeah. We used to play in the Colossal Cave. We used to go through it. We got in trouble. Of course, we shouldn't have been in there when we were, and we probably were endangering other people, but we did. I spent a lot of time in the cave. Oh, and yeah, we had a crank telephone, and it was, our ring was Colossal Cave number 3, and our ring was a long and 3 shorts. And of course, it was the party line, so we could listen to everything that was going on with everybody else. And we did, a lot of the times. And eventually we did get electricity and a real phone. But and the pool got actually modernized and filtered. And I guess the pool isn't there anymore either, is it? Everything's gone. Well, I was crushed, because that was where I grew up. It was just sad. It burned because of they put in central heat. It was built with a fireplace in every room. It didn't have central heat. But eventually it got central heat, and there was an oil burning heater in the basement, which eventually blew up long after we had gone. But that's why it burned down. And the guest house is still there, though, and that's where I lived with my husband and 2 kids after we were married, when they were babies. And we added on to it, and it became it started out just 2 rooms and a bathroom, and it got added on to. It's kind of a neat little house. It's still there. Well, I don't really know. I was just a kid. I was probably away at school, and they just decided they wanted to downsize maybe. They thought they were downsizing. They thought they were making life simpler. They didn't. They made it worse. They made it much more difficult. But they didn't know that at the time, because they moved to a place where they had to irrigate and do tractor work and bale hay, and it was a whole different operation. So I guess they just got tired of the ranch. I don't know what the reason was. Everybody knew everybody, but there weren't a whole lot of people to know. There weren't very many people out there. It was a good place. It was a good place to grow up, a good place to live. And I think I always have good feelings about Vail. It's a good place. And it will be. It will be good.
Now, sadly, Bunny is no longer with us, and the original La Posta Quemada Ranch house has burned down. but their impact and the legacy they've left in Vail is unquestionable and will surely go on to drive and inspire Vail's future. I hope you'll join us next month when we'll take you to more of Vail's special places. See you next time.